Well, kia ora e te whānau. As I promised, I have Sue Gray, co-leader for the Outdoors and Freedom Party, and also very important to know, as I've been promoting her over the last few days, she is running in our by-election in Tauranga. So, Sue, kia ora. How are you today?
Kia ora, Donna. What a privilege to be on your show. Thank you.
Awesome. Like I've asked people to do if they've got any questions, especially if they're living in Tauranga, to put the questions up, and then I can share those questions with us. But just tell us a little bit about the outdoors party first, so we give our whānau a bit of a backdrop of the outdoors party. Two, that I've been nominated as leader with you, and I feel really, really privileged. And whānau, that is the Te Tiriti relationship in action. We don't talk about it, we walk our talk, eh, Sue?
Absolutely. And that's really what's really exciting with the outdoors party, because we're just a whole bunch of people with a whole lot of life experience who just want to get out there and do it. We're sick of all the hooey, we want the doing. And we're from all over New Zealand. I was living in the South Island in Nelson, but I shifted up to Tauranga earlier this year, after spending a lot of time up here and enjoying the freedom movement up here, and meeting a lot of people up here, and people asking me, Sue, come and stand in the Tauranga by-election. I thought, well, why not? Why not?
That's right.
Yeah, the outdoors party.
That's right. And why not, eh, Sue? You know, and I think that's probably a good place to bring in, what's happened, and the motivation. And the party's called the Outdoors and Freedom Party. Explain to me the bit about the freedom.
Yeah, we started as the outdoors party, and then last year, over the last couple of years, obviously this whole freedom and democracy thing became such an important issue in New Zealand, because what we realised is if you don't have the freedom to do what you want to do, to speak, to think, to travel, to meet your family whānau, to go to marae, to go to the church, whatever you want to do, if you don't have those freedoms, all of the other things are kind of become irrelevant, So we really decided that it was time to step up and walk the freedom walk, and start talking about freedom, democracy, accountability, because they're the things that were really lost almost overnight. So we changed the name of the outdoors party to make it the Outdoors and Freedom Party. And that all got approved. It's quite a long process with the Electoral Commission. It took probably around 6 months. You've got to get your name approved, your logo approved. They get consultation from the other political parties. But we got all that process through. So officially now the Outdoors and Freedom Party.
Oh, that's so awesome. Part of the reason why I became a freedom fighter is because of the Vax injury. As whānau on my Facebook page are aware of, my father has not been Vax injured once, but actually twice. He got myocarditis for the second vaccination, and then he went for the booster, and he actually got pericarditis and pleurisy with his booster. And the irony is that the doctors were blaming COVID-19, the actual disease itself, as to the reason why my father was really sick. So for me, it's personal. And the other reason why it's personal is because me and my husband have buried whānau days after they received their vaccination, days, weeks, and there have been those that have passed away months. And it really depends on the person. A lot of Māori are carrying, they have comorbidity, which means that they're carrying other diseases with them. And what I've found in my observations too is that fast tracks them to the grave. And I've written letters to the Ministry of Health. I've written letters to the Disability Commissioner to actually say, can you please investigate, because whānau have been impacted and adversely impacted by these vaccines, and nothing's happened.
Yeah. It's a shocking state of affairs, right from the start, when MedSafe decided not to give full consent to the vaccine. And they decided that in January, February 2021, because they weren't satisfied that the benefits exceeded the risks. So they looked at all the available information and they said, well, there's too much we don't know. We don't know if it's safe or not. We don't know if it's effective or not. We don't know if it stops transmission or infection. So MedSafe did an okay job back then. So then, obviously under a bit of pressure, they approved it with what's called provisional consent with 58 conditions. 58 conditions about, is it safe, is it effective? When we went from, making in the laboratory to making in big commercial factories, do we still have the same quality control? What's the effect after a bit of a period of time? Does it last long or not? All of these questions that everyone would have known was so important. The very day they approved it with only provisional consent with 58 conditions, the Attorney General, sitting in their armchairs doing this live recording show, talking about how safe and effective it was. I mean, this is just terrible. And then when you peel back the layers and you have a look at all the evidence and the documentation, one of the concerns from the start actually was that it was mainly tested on European nationalities. But what they knew is that people with other genetics can often have a different effect. And so there was always this risk that for Maori people, for Pacifica people, for Asian people, it might not be safe or even less safe than it is for everybody else. But did they tell everybody that? No. And yet what happened is, as you've said, Donna, with your whānau, you find out that people start dying and getting myocarditis, pericarditis, and they're going, oh, no, couldn't be that. Well, if it's not that, what is it?
Well, that's exactly right. What they did is they blamed my father's diabetes, and I said he had a good heart before he had his jab. My dad was a walker and he used to walk a lot of places. And, now he can barely walk because his lungs and his heart fills up with water, with fluid. And so it's a serious matter. And then if you look on MedSafe, they've got 3,200 serious adverse reactions to the vaccination. They've got so that's thousands of serious adverse reactions, and they've got 62,000 adverse reactions, let alone the serious ones. And then if you look at MedSafe as well, they've got over 2,000 deaths. If you include the boosters, nearly 3,000 deaths after the first, second jab and the booster, and yet no one is connecting the dots. They're saying there's a temporal association, but no one's actually connecting the dots. Now, when my father was in hospital, we had the renal doctors, the heart doctors and the registrars there. And the first thing they said to me as I walked through the door, your father's really sick because he contracted COVID-19, a few weeks ago. And I said, that's not the reason why he's in hospital. He's in hospital. If you check his file, he got myocarditis. And I said, and I forced the echo scan for the myocarditis. They didn't offer it. That showed up he had an inflamed heart. And I said, and so he was injured with his second jab. Now he's injured with his booster. Well, I had my mukapuna's 21st just in the weekend gone, and it's great to celebrate some real positive stuff. And found out that his koro was in the hospital. His other koro was in the hospital the same time as my father with exactly the same symptoms, and he had only just had his booster 2 weeks prior to that. So, whānau, there are a lot of whānau out there that are just not connecting the dots. Then when we were burying our whānau, we went to one urupa that had 12 new graves when we buried our whānau. And again, no one's connecting the dots. Went to my auntie's when we had our unveiling for my father's sister, went to the Urupa where she was buried, and there were 3 rows of new graves, and we counted them. There were 14. Now, that was like months ago. Last year even, and we haven't been back to those Urupa to see if there's been an increase. So we just need to use our own eyes, use our own critical thinking, our brain, and connect the dots. And what's happening is that I've found that those that have been vaccine injured aren't getting the care from our health system, and that's a real worry, Sue. Have you found the
Oh,
same thing?
absolutely. Look, that is a problem everywhere. I just had a call from a woman from Taupo the other day, and her 23-year-old son had been airlifted from Taupo to Hamilton Waikato Hospital in emergency because of a heart attack. 23 years old, a heart attack. Like, did you ever hear of that before? And but then when he got there, the cardiologist said, "Oh, but it wasn't what was it?" So anyway, he recovered enough. He went home. He's had a couple of other times back in hospital. He's now getting vitamin C therapy at this clinic. But at the same clinic is this 23-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 16-year-old. All a small town, all the same symptoms. This is the thing. And all of them, and the same, you talk to Casey Hodgkinson and some of the others that have come and spoken out on their vaccine injuries, all the same thing. Everyone goes, no, couldn't have been that. Couldn't have been persisting so hard with her fiance, Rory, Nan. She finally got the report through from the pathology saying, yes, this is the only cause we can think of. So she kind of broke down the path on this myocarditis and pericarditis. He was the first one that they had to admit that they couldn't find anything else. And so for me, if one person can get a vaccine and then get myocarditis and then die, if another person gets the vaccine and then gets myocarditis, and whether they die or recover, wouldn't you think that that has to be considered as a possible cause? You can't say that it couldn't be the cause.
Well, that is the problem. I asked the Ministry of Health to investigate, for my father, so I was doing it at a personal level. But since I've been part of the Freedom Group, there are just so many stories out there that are not getting out into the public arena. We have to get them out through our platforms to get those stories out, because no one wants to hear. Here's the thing. The people that are vaccine injured did the right thing. They listened to the government. The government said it was safe and effective, and we've found out that it hasn't been. For example, me and my husband go to the pools, right? Every single day, and our pools have been shut down since Sunday because the whole team at Hamilton Pools are down with COVID. Now, I rang up the council today and I said to them, but you should be all fine. You're not supposed to get COVID because you all got your vaccines and your boosters. And she actually got quite titchy with me on the phone. But that's what they said.
Well,
You're not going to get sick. So they had to shut down a whole the aquatic pools in Hamilton because they had no staff.
And the same at the university. My daughter secretly went and got vaccinated without telling me because she wanted to go to university with her friends the very first week, and got so-called COVID from the very first week. Didn't work at all to stop it. And now they've gone back second term. They've all got sick again. Actually, they're all a whole lot sicker than they were the first term, but they're saying, well, it's not testing positive for COVID. We don't know what it is. But, what's going on with their immune systems?
Well, that's exactly it. And here's the thing, long COVID, the new term long COVID, I've stated on even on my platform, and I go on to One News and News Grub, as I call them, but News Hub. and I said, to me, long COVID is a code word for vaccine injured.
Yeah. You're on to it, Elsie.
Well, because
taking
there was
our
a young
words like safe and effective.
Yeah. Well, I was watching the news last night of this young man that has long COVID, and and all the symptoms were the symptoms of those people who have been vaccine injured. And then you see a lot of media reports, Sue, where doctors are now coming out saying that people are getting seriously unwell through COVID with heart diseases,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the myocarditis. So they got to try and hide it somewhere. And my husband said to me, "Gee, are people that thick?" He said, "Seriously, are people that?"
Well,
Yeah,
the very thing we predicted, because when they were doing the animal studies on previous vaccines for coronaviruses, what happened was it looked like it was working. And then when the animals they tested it on actually caught the virus, they got a whole lot sicker than the animals that hadn't been given the vaccine. And so they canned the experiment. And that was one of the things we were always worried about is, okay, you're giving people all these injections. First, you don't really know if they work because you're only testing it such a short time. But what if it actually makes it worse? What if it creates an immune reaction that's actually going to give you an autoimmune disorder that's worse than what you would have got in the first place? And so we predicted that that was a risk. And now all of these so-called long COVID is exactly the type of thing we predicted. But, they've got all these treatments, but they're not telling people. This is damaging the immune system. It's damaging the mitochondria. There's people, the doctors around the world have got these great effective treatments. Some of the New Zealand doctors are aware of it, but the government aren't telling the people what you can do. They'd rather have all these people sick with long COVID to make everybody else scared. It's
that's right.
terrible what's happening.
Scared and justifies booster after booster after booster. Now, I want you to tell people, Sue, you're not just a lawyer, are you? I mean, getting to know you, you've actually blown me away because I knew you as a lawyer, but you're a lot more than a lawyer, Sue. So you can talk. If you put a certain portie on, you can talk to people about science. Why?
Because before I studied law, I studied science. So I studied biochemistry and microbiology, BSc. And then I studied to be a health protection officer and environmental health officer, which the job working for what was called the Department of Health in those days was, guess what? Contact tracing and investigating infectious diseases and following up all of these things and preventing epidemics. And so we worked for the medical officer of health. So the medical officer of health was the doctor in charge, and we were the investigators that went out and investigated, wrote reports, put two and two together, and came up with all the conclusions. So yeah, that's my training. I'm not just making all this stuff up. This is like 30 years of training, the mixture of science, infectious disease investigation, and law. So that gets a little bit frustrating when people say, oh, but you don't know what you're talking about. Well, actually, I've got a fairly good idea what I'm talking about. And also the other thing, because of the work I'm doing, I'm working with the doctors and the lawyers and the scientists and all the other experts from all around the world. So, pretty much every week we've got some kind of email or Zoom meeting or Signal meeting or whatever, sharing information, people asking each other questions. If I got a question, I just flick out a query. I get back all this advice from all these experts around the world. So we've actually got a way better network as the people that we've created than the bureaucrats, because their network are only the people that will do it for the money. Our network is the people that do it because they really care and they really do want to get to the truth of it, just based on all of the evidence.
That's right, and we're doing a lot of God's work because it's all for Aroha. But I've got a question here, and I'll pull it up and see if you can see it. Can you see it from Lorena? She said, will you be also helping people and acknowledging people with jab injuries and asking for government assistance?
Yes, good question. And look, absolutely, this is what we've been doing right from the start. The challenge is that there are so many people with jab injuries that it's really, really hard to help everybody individually. But we're trying to get some sort of standard form answers and connect people together and get a plan so that people can really learn how to help themselves and how to connect in, because we're just swamped with so many people who have had vax injuries. But what I've been doing is helping a few of them that are kind of leading the charge and helping them get started and pushing the boundaries of what the government's doing. And that creates a path for the others who come behind. So if you've got a vax injury, you definitely need to get advice from a doctor or a health practitioner who understands vax injuries, not just any old doctor. It's got to be someone from NZ Doctors SOS or from some doctor that's actually got that kind of training and awareness, because otherwise you just come back with the old brick wall of, oh, well, we don't really know what this is. It might be long COVID. Whereas if you get the right doctor, the other thing you can do is get on Voices for Freedom. They've got a whole lot of Zoom webinars with experts from around the world. There's the Global Health Alliance people. There are all sorts of amazing people from around the world that have treated thousands and thousands of cases of COVID and vax injuries successfully. And they're basically looking at oxidizing treatments and all these treatments that the mainstream won't tell you about. But there are a lot of treatments there that are working really, really well. So do your own research. The next thing is that you should be entitled to accident compensation, because if you get a medical treatment in New Zealand and you don't get the outcome from that you want, you're entitled to accident compensation. Now, sometimes accident compensation, ACC people will try and block you and turn you away. Don't let them get away with that, because you're entitled to that. And the difference it makes is they then have to pay for your treatment, and you're entitled to 80% of your salary. So it's much better solution for you than just getting fobbed off on a sickness benefit or whatever. If you get turned down by ACC, you can seek a review of that. And all you have to do is write one sentence, I want a review. It's as simple as that. Well, I want a review. And that puts it through to another process, and get someone with you there that's a lawyer or a good advocate who will help you go through the ACC process of a review. And if you've got the right evidence there, you'll get your ACC. They have to do it whether they like it or not.
I know, and I guess that's where people that I've been talking to, Sue, have been challenged. They have gone through the ACC process, even trying to get their doctors to refer them to ACC has been problematic as well. And I guess what people don't realise is that we need Sue in government now, and the reason why we need you in government now, and that's why the by-election is so important, is because you're a lawyer, two, you're a scientist, so you actually know what sort of questions to ask in Parliament. I just want you to just elaborate on that a bit more, so that the people understand. And so when we start sharing your interview out, they understand why it's so important to vote for you, because we know through our experience in Wellington that the 120 members of Parliament all colluded with this government, and they all refused to come out and talk to us. So we can't rely on anyone out of those 120 members of Parliament to be the voices for us in Parliament. So can you just elaborate on that a little bit for me and for everyone else?
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, look, that was so shocking for me that not a single one of those elected representatives, and that's what they are, they're not there for their own career, they're there to represent all of us. Not a single one of them came out. And part of the problem is if you're elected for the Labour Party, you have to do what the boss of the Labour Party tells you. And if you're elected for the National Party, you have to do what the boss of the National Party tells you. And the same for the Greens, and the same for the Maori Party, and the same for ACT. So, but the by-election is an opportunity to vote for somebody that's not locked into any of those franchise kind of agreements that stop people doing their thing. It's an opportunity to get a whole new voice in there. And so my promise is that if I'm voted in there, I will be the voice for the people that nobody is doing at the moment. And I can promise that I can do that, because you just look at my track record. I've had, like, I don't know, 25, 30 years of challenging the government on so many different issues. Challenge them to get medicinal cannabis made more available, and we're about to challenge them again to make it even more accessible for people that need it. Challenge them from radiation, cell towers next to primary schools and preschools. I've challenged them on poisons. I've challenged them on all kinds of different health issues. And I've challenged them in Parliament. I've challenged them in the court. I've even challenged their judges. One case, the judge forgot to tell everybody that he owned a racehorse starred with the lawyer for the other party. And when my client found out after the case, my client was not happy. He said, well, how can it be a fair hearing when they're spending all the time together choosing broodmares and racehorses and whatever? Of course, it didn't seem right. So we had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to challenge that wasn't right. And the second time, the first time they said, oh, no, judges, they know the rules, that it'll be fine. And we said, no. We got some more information. We went back again to the Supreme Court. And the second time they agreed with us that it wasn't right. The judge had an apparent bias, and that my client got another hearing. And then we went to the Judicial Conduct Commissioner, and eventually the Judicial Conduct Commissioner said that the judge had basically failed to perform at the standard expected by a judge, and he eventually got forced to resign. So it's not easy taking on the system. It's definitely not taking on the Supreme Court judges, the politicians. I did the case for Rose Renton, who's the Green Fairy, who got charged with assaulting Nick Smith, who was our local MP. So I've cross-examined him in court. Look, I'm not scared to take on these people. And this is the thing, that a lot of people want to be a politician, but it's a pretty weird environment when you get there. You need to be really experienced in asking questions, like Donna said, and you need to be experienced in how all these processes work, or you just get sort of shunted into the corner and silenced. So we've got to get someone in there that gets there and hits the ground running and actually kicks butt of that system that is letting us all down at the moment, and starts shining some spotlight on some of these things that are going on that the people want to know about, but the people haven't been told about. And the thing is, if we get one person in this year, next year we've got a general election. So if we've got one in, what a big inspiration to every other city around New Zealand, every other rural area around New Zealand. If Tauranga could do it, let's do it ourselves. Let's get a whole new face in. Let's kick butt, get out the old, and bring in a new team that the community chooses, and get them there to change and bring back some democracy for everybody.
And I'm glad, and you're absolutely right. It's so important, because what these lockdowns over the last 2 years have done is we've lost confidence in ourselves. We've lost faith in ourselves. There's a lot of mental illness, suicide. You look at what the mandates have done. I mean, tens of thousands of businesses, mum and dad businesses, have gone. And we've just had a budget, we've just had a budget, and out of, I think it was about $157 billion was, I mean, I wasn't too excited about the budget, and I haven't had a lot of time to go over the budget. From a Māori perspective, only 1 billion out of 157 billion has gone into Māori kaupapa, including the Māori Health Authority. So there's some major concerns. There's some little wins, but there are some major concerns. And I've always said, and this is what I love about being with the Outdoors and Freedom Party, is that Māori are the canary in the mine. It happens to us first. So we remember, and we saw, if we weren't there, we saw the pictures of what happened at the occupation, and what it feels like to be discriminated against, what it feels like to have no mana, and to be treated like a second class citizen. Māori have been feeling that for quite some time. And what I love about the outdoors party is we're coming together as a whānau. And so we actually do know how each other feel. I just believe that we're just a little bit more experienced because we've been at it for a lot longer. But we are the canary in the mine. Someone, Kataraina, has come up, and the question is, what would your campaign strategy be to get more Māori behind you? For me, it's just about telling the truth. I have always told the truth. I am a principled person. I've been an advocate, and I also hold a legal background as well. And I advocate for a lot of vulnerable whānau, a lot of vulnerable communities, and I go where other advocates dare to go. And so do you, Sue.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I love about you too. And like I say, it can be a thankless mahi, but someone has to do it. And we're not the ones that the budget comes to. We're the ones that pick up the pieces where the budget doesn't go.
That's so true. And this whole idea of connecting with Māori, with a by-election, it's very interesting because if you vote for somebody that's already in Parliament, it's a wasted vote. Firstly,
Yes.
because they're already there. So, for example, Jan Tinetti, who's the Labour Party MP, she's already there. So it doesn't make 1 ounce of difference if she gets your vote or not. Completely wasted vote. And secondly, why would you vote for somebody that wasn't there when you asked them to help, who actually conspired against you, who stood inside the building when everybody else was standing out in the rain saying, please come and talk to us? Why would you vote for one of those 120 people, one of those political parties? Whereas if you vote in a by-election for a different person, your vote counts. And your vote can make, it's like a multiplier effect of difference. So we're hoping that the Māori community in Tauranga, which is a big community, we've already been working hard to connect as many people as we can. We're really keen to get out there and get on the marae, get into some good hui with everybody. Come along, Donna's going to come along as well to some of the meetings, and we can share a whole lot of ideas and listen as well, because it's not just about what we think, it's actually about what you think, and it's about what you want, and it's about getting your voices heard, because that's the way we can make this whole thing work. Like Donna said, the Māori people have been treated so badly for so long. There's no question about that. Now we've got a whole nother group of people that have been mandated out of their work, just discriminated against without any proper reason at all. And they are starting to feel that understanding of just how bad that all feels. We've got a government, though, that's deliberately dividing the haves and the have-nots and trying to separate every group, separate within families, separate within communities, separate on the basis of whether you're vaccinated or not. Really? I mean, did we ever get separated because some people had the flu vaccine and others didn't? It was never a thing. It's just this new thing that they've invented. So our mission is to unite the communities again, and it doesn't mean everyone has to be the same. It means that we celebrate that we've all got our own personalities and our own preferences and our own different ways of doing things, but that's actually a good thing. It's a good thing that we're all different. It would be very boring if we were all sitting there being like little yellow Lego people that all match and all line up and stand in one little square. I think that's what the government and the globalists are wanting for us, whereas what we want as communities is to thrive and to be ourselves and to be able to talk about what we want to talk about and to move on through this isolation and this discrimination and this bad treatment that the government's been giving to almost everybody, and actually find a way through that, but a way through where we come out stronger and where we come through as a really strong, powerful community. But to be able to do that, we really have to change the way everybody's acting. Like, we actually need everybody to front up and tick that voting box, you know. This is one of the really, really good things, though, because a lot of people want to help. but people are a little bit scared sometimes of speaking out because of the peer pressure or whatever. Well, actually, voting is a really easy thing you do, because you just have to turn up and you just have to secretly, nobody's watching you, you just secretly tick the box that you want to tick. Don't tick Labor or National or one of the ones that you normally tick. Choose someone different that is going to bring some whole different experience to the whole thing. So it's a pretty easy thing to do. But the second biggest group of voters in New Zealand are the people who don't vote. Now,
Yeah.
if the second biggest group of vote, and a lot of that is Maori, a lot of it is people that are doing sovereignty, that are people that are just fed up with the system, and I understand why they're fed up. And I'm not saying don't do what you're already doing. Keep doing all of that, but just come along and vote as well. Because what's the biggest act of protest you could ever see is if all of the people that usually don't vote all turn up in the Tauranga by-election and
And
they
vote.
do vote.
And here's the thing: this is what our whānau, this is what Māori don't realise. And I've done the when I was very young, the I won't vote. Because I was upset with the government. I mean, I've been an Indigenous activist pretty much all my life, and I come over into the outdoors party really proud of my track record. And so I've seen questions about tangata te riti and tangata whenua. Well, we are that representation. I'm the tangata whenua, you're the representation of tangata te riti. And that's what I'm saying to whānau. We are that in action. We're not talking the words, we're walking the words. And with our sovereign whānau who normally don't vote, the difficulty there is that when you don't vote, it automatically goes to national. It automatically goes to the right. It automatically goes to ACT. So when the left don't vote out of protest, their vote automatically shifts. So I just want to get that through to our whānau so they understand what not voting does. It actually does us more harm. And the reason why we have to engage in this process, because this is where all the decisions are made and this is where all the putia is, all the money is. Now, if we look at democracy, for example, and you took the government to task and they won because of Section 5, of the New Zealand Bill of Rights. Section 5, if it was demonstrably justified, and they called it pandemic has been demonstrably justified. Is that justifiable now? Because the government's pulled back on mandates, but it's like they're pushing employers out there and saying, we're pulling back, but you carry on.
Yeah. It's a mad regime. Look, I don't understand why any employer is going along with a mandate, because the employer is going to end up with the liability under the health and safety, the work safe, the employment law. So the government knows they can't get away with it, but somehow they've convinced the employers to push their jab. None of it makes sense. I think there's just a whole lot of hype going around, a whole lot of spin. But what we've got to get people doing is actually go back and look at the facts, because most of New Zealand's had COVID now, whatever COVID is. Some people think it's the flu or the cold or whatever it is. Most people have had it. Why would you go and get vaccinated again? First of all, why would you get it after well, if you got it after you've got vaccinated, the vaccine obviously isn't working. But if you've had COVID, why would you go and get vaccinated afterwards for COVID? Because that doesn't make sense either, especially when we know there's all these risks. And then thirdly, why would you punish somebody who's smart enough to say, I don't want to get vaccinated? Like, how does that work?
And why force people to get a booster when they were vaccine injured on the first or second jab?
That's one of the worst things of all. And we argued that in the second no jab, no job case, that one of the worst things about the law was that there was no provision for exemptions. That at the very least, people that have got a medical reason or a religious reason, a human rights reason for not wanting a vaccine should be allowed to get an exemption. And, the Crown thought we were going to win. And the night after we were in court, they slipped in a change to the law to allow those exemptions. And that was there for a week. And people could go to any health practitioner, and if the health practitioner thought they shouldn't get vaccinated, they should get they could get an exemption. And then the judge made his decision, and then they took it away again. And only Ashley Bloomfield can give an exemption. Now, how can Ashley Bloomfield possibly know what your medical condition is?
And here's the thing, talking about Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, he's a bureaucrat. He's not an elected member of parliament. And if we take democracy, sorry for interrupting, because you probably had a train of thought, but I sort of want to put that out there. And if you carry on with your train of thought, so you know where my thinking's going. So you've got a non-elected bureaucrat who's making major political decisions that impact on our lives, and now that's happening at a WHO level with the pandemic treaty. So sorry for interrupting, but if we can sort of try and connect to that as well.
Yeah, very, very good point, Donna. And I've just written to Nanai Mahuta today to ask her for more information about the advice, because has anybody been consulted with about the pandemic treaty? I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen a thing out of them, yet they must have been talking for it for quite a while. And normally with these treaties, they have some discussion at the bureaucratic and international level, but they also have to have a mandate from the people. So how can it be that they can suddenly go off and do this without any mandate from the people? Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence to show that the World Health Organization could do a better job than individual countries? Where's the evidence that the World Health Organization knows better for an island like New Zealand than they do for America or China or Russia or England or wherever else? Do we want that? Why don't we want, I mean, must be an interesting position for Maori, where you've had enough challenges trying to get recognition even here in your own country. Next thing, they're making more decisions internationally without even asking us.
Well, I guess the irony is that Nanai Mahuta is a Māori, and that very action could potentially be a breach, be a Waitangi tribunal claim in itself. And the irony is that she is Māori, but it's serious. So not only are we losing our rights, and fighting for our rights and freedoms, and for me, I'm at the twilight end of my life, but I fear for my mokopuna. That's who I fear for. I fear for their future. And if we don't fight now, if we don't stand up now, they are the ones that are going to suffer the most. And so, do our politicians go into these organizations? Are they naive, ignorant, or actually are they part of the bigger picture? Because here's the issue I have with the WHO. The WHO is funded by Bill Gates. Here's an issue that I have with the University of Otago. The University of Otago is funded by Bill Gates. Now, you would have seen the report that came out by Dr. Hato Tawa, and he brought out about the disinformation project, and there are 12 people or 12 groups or 12 platforms that they said have been spreading 70% of the disinformation. Now, it's all very well to use that word disinformation, but let's be specific, so at least the people that they're targeting can actually rebut. That's what happens in a court of law, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Let's tell us exactly what it is that they say is wrong, and then let's have a conversation about that. Let's look at the evidence. And the funny thing is, when we say to them, hey, let's front up and debate this, let's actually sit down and go through it, they can't answer, they can't defend their positions. But then they're quite happy to call everybody names who challenges them. It's the whole, and the disinformation officer is funded by the Prime Minister's office. What does that say?
Well, that's right. And here's the thing. We know, and it's this is all fact. It's not disinformation, but we know that there have been porkies coming out of the Prime Minister's office and coming from the Prime Minister, from Hipkins and from Bloomfield. I mean, there have been actual porkies where they've been caught in the lie. So, me been to university, holding a master's. I know that you have to, go through a whole process when it comes to research, and you've got to be objective. Now, this report is not objective, because if it was objective, they would add the government into that misinformation as well, and they didn't. So it's biased. It's a biased report funded by the government. We can't take it
And
seriously.
they would specify exactly what evidence they rely on. They would specify the assumptions that they make. They would specify all the things that they've just glossed over, because it looks like one of those reports where they know what answer they want, and then they just fudge everything to get to the answer. And that is just a waste of taxpayers' money, and it's a waste of an opportunity to actually unravel this whole thing and sort it out properly.
Yes. Look, there's a lot of comments, and I'm trying to flick through as we're talking. I'm trying to also catch some of the comments, and I might just randomly put a comment up and see what they have to say. So this is some of the names I find really difficult to pronounce. Shaz, I think Shaz. It says, I have a history of abuse and have trust issues. There is no way I'm going to allow someone to inject something untested into me, for a doctor to ask if I trust them to allow them to administer a treatment. I don't agree with this is wrong. And I guess that's what the government said. Like for Māori, it was protect your whakapapa. Now, when you tell a kaumātua to protect their whakapapa, and I understand kaumātua will do whatever it takes to protect their mokopuna, because that's their job. That's their role in life, is to protect their mokopuna. So from a Māori perspective, they trusted the government. They trusted Bloomfield, and we know that the science is changing and the narrative is changing all the time. Are they running out of rope? Is the government running out of rope?
I think they are. And also, right from the start, one of these problems has been this thing about informed consent. It's very clear in New Zealand. You can't be forced to have medical treatment. You have to always be told what your choices are, what the alternatives are, and what the risks are, what the benefits are. If it's under any pressure or duress, it's not informed consent. It's the same with a rape or with any other assault on your body. If it's done under force, it's not informed consent. It's illegal. And it's always been like that with medicine. This is the first time we've had this kind of idea that they can force you to have something into your body under a threat. And so actually, if you just look at it under traditional law, every single person who got a vaccination under a threat of losing their job or any other threat, not being able to go out with their friends, not be able to play their sport, any of those, not being able to travel, not being able to go in the retirement home, see their family, whatever. Every one of those is actually an assault. And we've had this case in New Zealand before. We've had this case with the cervical cancer inquiry. Dame Sylvia Cartwright, she did a massive inquiry, I think in the late 1980s or early 1990s, 20, 30 years ago. A massive inquiry where doctors were treating their patients without informed consent. And that led to the whole new laws in the Health and Disability Code and all of these things being written down really, really clearly about what people's rights were. And it was to protect against medical treatment being forced on people, which is exactly what Shaz just said in the comment. It's exactly to protect against those very things. And this is why it's just so wrong. It's not a question of even is the medicine good or bad. It's wrong to force people to have a medical treatment. It's just so wrong. We're not slaves.
No.
Even if we were slaves, they couldn't force us. But we're not slaves. Why are they forcing us?
Well, I mean that's. I think that's a really good word, because what I'm seeing is enslavement. When you look at what this government, I mean, in the last lot of campaigns that I've been involved in, the last two, I didn't hear or see Labor campaigning on cashless societies and a social credit system where our digital ID is all going to be put. it's going to be digitalized, and it's going to be controlled by certain entities or certain governments, and then they tend to contract out those types of mahi. It's really, really scary, because we're stepping into the unknown. And even in 2020, I debated against Nanai, who's now our foreign minister, and none of these issues were ever discussed. But I tell you what, come the next general election, I'm going to be bringing up all these issues, and rightfully so. And I just don't understand why other politicians and other media do not challenge the status quo, because them and their whānau are going to be pulled into all of this.
I can tell you why the media don't, because the government is paying them not to. It's really simple. I had an interview yesterday, and he told me he was going to remove parts of my interview, my statement on answers to certain questions, because it didn't fit the government narrative. And if the person that interviewed me didn't remove it, his editor would. And I said, that is so wrong. So it's so wrong that the media, who are supposed to be one of the kind of checks on government behaviour, that are supposed to be scrutinising what the government say and helping us see where the lies are and where the truth is and where the assumptions are, the media are not doing their job. And like you said, Donna, the politicians have got no respect for democracy. They should be telling us what their plans are for the next 3 years and getting a mandate for those plans. But this is all just sprung on us. And then often they're changing the law in the middle of the night. They're changing it without any consultation. And they're big changes that they're making. They're not just some minor little change that just affects a few people to tidy up a small problem. These are major changes. With the Medicines Act, when they changed that after my first Vax Challenge case, we won in the court, and we won because they only could use a provisional consented medicine for a limited number of patients. And then they were trying to roll it out to everyone over 16, and everybody agreed that everybody in New Zealand over 16, that's maybe 4 million people, that is not a limited number of patients. You can't possibly say that's a limited number of patients. So what do? They changed the law in 24 hours. I was just on a live stream saying, great news, everybody, we've just won this court case. And the news already came through that they were going to be changing the law, and they'd started already. So this is the kind of lack of democracy, lack of respect. And actually, it's interesting you're up against Nana Mahuta. I can't wait to see you having some debates with her next year. It's going to be very, very, very interesting, because she's the one that just removed or reappointed the commissioners in Tauranga. So I understand there was some disagreement about how effective the councillors could do their job. But the information I've had is that the councillors could have sorted it out just fine themselves if they'd been given a chance. But whether that's right or wrong, she's now said, well, I'm so sure that the people of Tauranga can't choose good people for themselves that we're not even going to give you a chance. We're not even going to give people of Tauranga a chance to have a local body election, because my commissioners are just going to stay in the job. And guess what? I've chosen commissioners that are going to push through the three waters and are going to push through the things that I want pushed through. Now, how does that work?
Well, that breaks my heart, actually. And the reason why it breaks my heart is I've got to say, for a Māori to do that when we've had 200 years of oppression, and we've been fighting against 200 years of oppression, to then come back and say to a community, this paternalistic or maternalistic attitude, that use a stupid, and you can't select people to represent you. Well, it's not up to the government to pick and choose. I mean, if they pick and choose, donkeys to stand up, well, so be it. That's what that community chose, and it's up to that community to decide if they want them in there or not. And I just think there's been too much overreach in the last 2 years. We've just seen, to me, we're not a democracy. I do not see a democracy. You undermine our Bill of Rights and our human rights. There is no democracy. You don't have a fourth estate which is our media, there is no democracy. You don't have separations of powers between the judiciary and parliament. There is no democracy. So what our people, we've been trained in that area, but what our people don't know is we know and we see slowly but surely our democracy is literally being flushed down the toilet. And how ironic that a freedom fighter is standing up in the by-election in Tauranga, where I think Tauranga needs democracy the most.
Yeah, the people of Tauranga are really aware of this because they're really angry. They're frustrated. They feel just walked all over by central government. What Nanaia Mahuta has done to their democracy is just shameful. But this is a chance for actually voices to stand up, the people to stand up and say, we're going to show you. We're not taking this lying down. We're going to show you we've had enough of this. We're not voting for you anymore. We're going to vote for someone different. It's a really, really interesting, the opportunity to win back the lost ground and more. It's a bit like a tug of war. Nanaia did a big tug down her way, and she took away a whole lot of democracy. And now this is a chance for the people of Tauranga to get back and pull really hard back the other way, and not just drag it up back to the middle where it started, but to drag it way back the other way and really turn things around. This is why it's all so exciting. It's a huge opportunity as long as we can get at the people inspired enough to do their thing, because I can talk as much as I like. It doesn't make any difference if the people don't get out and stand with me. And that's what I love with you, Donna, that you're out there walking the walk. We're out there, and I'm out there walking the walk. When we all get out there together and walk the walk, and we get a whole lot of people walking the walk with us, just imagine what we can do.
Yeah, and there's a number of small parties, and ideologically, I think we have our differences, but where we find common ground is in the freedom space. Māori have been fighting for sovereignty for a long time, and now we're seeing that all our sovereignty is at risk, and so Māori, so for our whānau, Māori will have no sovereignty if everybody's sovereignty has gone. So that's why it's so important that at a national level that we fight for our freedoms and we fight for our rights. And I'm an occupier and a protester from way back. Ask my husband, ask my mokopuna, I drag them along all the time. But we have to stand up, and out of all the different protests and all the different occupations I've been in, this, to me, this is probably one of the most important ones for me.
And one of the beautiful things about when we were protesting in Wellington, standing together in Wellington, but everybody from all over New Zealand, from all kinds of career paths and from all kinds of socioeconomic, from all kinds of races, from all kinds of ages, from mothers and fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers and tiny babies sometimes, everybody was working together with that same spirit of taking back our freedom and standing up against the cruel government that were abusing their power. Everyone was in it together. That's what I loved about it so much, that we showed that we could do it. We still had so much spirit in New Zealand that when the going gets tough, the people really come out in droves to stand up for their rights. And the imagination and the creativity, and we had the music and we had the food and the dancing and the fun. We didn't just do it, we did it in style. We did it to show them they can't take away our lives, they can't take away our opportunity to get together and connect with people. If they think they can get away with that, we really showed them, and we did it on their own front lawn.
We did. And remember, whānau, that's our front lawn. Hey, that's the people's front lawn. And the experience I had there was absolutely amazing. It was like a festival. It was actually like a festival. You'll hear all the negative narrative coming from the politicians, the councillors, and even iwi leaders. You'll hear all that negative rhetoric. But I thought it was ironic, Sue, and that's me with my suspicious mind, but I found it quite ironic that the police just received $600 million after, they did the dirty for the government. And was that the payoff? Was it that they sat behind? People can call it a conspiracy, but I think I have a right to know. I have a right to know if someone sat behind, we were at Parliament, where they invited into a back room, sat down and said, look, if you do this, we'll give you this.
Yeah, well, you can be sure.
The irony is that they were budgeted $600 million, and all I can say, we're going to have more Māori. We're at the top of the OECD list for incarceration. We're going to have more Māori incarcerated. We've seen the brutality of the police, and Māori have been experiencing that for nearly 200 years. And I've had whānau that have been shot dead by the New Zealand police because they haven't dealt with the issues of racism. And now there's another group that have been discriminated again. The fear for me is the militarization of our police force, and they can easily do that with 600 million. There's no oversight on how they spend that money.
And they showed in Wellington that they don't even care about the law. Like, when our own police force don't feel bound by the law, we really have a problem. I'm surprised that the government is proud that they've given more money to the police. For me, that shows that the government has failed the people, because a government that is working with the people needs less police, because everybody feels that they're part of the community, that they're looking out for each other, they're not needing the police. The fact that they feel that they need so much more money for the police is proof that they've failed. Yes. We need to start getting people aware of this, because that is not the solution. This idea of putting boundaries, putting layers of police around Parliament, putting concrete blocks everywhere. Who wants to live in a country like that? New Zealand is not that country,
Well, what we saw at the occupation was pretty frightening, and what I experienced when I was down there was a coming together of people who wanted to speak to their elected parliamentarians, and it didn't happen. And so that sits with those 120, and we do have to look at all of them and the role that they played on March the 2nd, the leading up to March the 2nd. Look, this has been amazing, and I'm sure we could speak for a long, long time. Is there any? I mean, I can. I can talk. Is there anything else that you want to share with everyone? How can they contact you in regards to your by-election and?
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a Facebook page, Sue Gray Tauranga. That's probably the easiest. We've got a web page, Sue Gray Tauranga at outdoorsparty.co.nz. I hope. I'm terrible at that. SueGrayTauranga.co.nz. Sorry about that. So that's the web page. It's just getting a bit upgraded at the moment, but it'll be back in action really soon. I've got a whole lot of meetings around Tauranga. People can message me. They can message you, or you can pass them on to me. I'm really happy. I've been doing a few meetings at people's houses or marae. Really happy to come along and just sit down with a group of you, talk to you, listen to what you think about things. Just share your ideas, because this is the whole thing. People have lost their voices. This is the chance for people to find their voices again and unite together and stand up against the regime that we've got at the moment to create more what we do want. So this is a great chance. Don't be scared to reach out. If I don't reply straight away, I'm a bit swamped, but we're trying to work out how the team can sort of coordinate things, and we can talk to as many people as we possibly can and understand what people's views are. You can send me an email as well, sue@outdoorsparty.co.nz. That's a good way if you like emails. Lots of ways of contacting me.
Oh, that is so awesome. I'm going to ask you if we can meet at least once a week via this link. And so, you can share updates and share what tauranga want. And I'm sure, democracy, that's really important. When this government takes away a city's democracy, you might have more supporters there than people actually think. The government might be doing you a favour, actually. I just want to mihi out to you, e te rangatira, for coming on to my page, for sharing your whakaaro. I'm really excited about our future together as co-leaders, and I'll be over there whenever you need me. Just put the call out. I've put the pānui out to the whānau on my page to support your campaign, those that are in Tauranga. So we'll do whatever we can, Sue, to get you across the line.
Thank you so much, Donna. It's just such a privilege to work with you. It's just so inspiring. You've got such a lot of wisdom to share, and it's just a wonderful thing that feels the right thing for the right time, that we can stand together and work a way forward for everybody. It's so exciting. I'd love to be on your page. Come over here. We'll do some talks together, whatever we can do to get the information out to the people.
Okay, well, we'll look at bringing you back on next week, and we'll take it a week at a time, because I know you're really, really busy. But we'll look at putting some time away for you next week. So thank you again. Ngā mihi i a koe.
Thank you.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.